Hey, good afternoon. So, for reasons I don't fully understand, the most popular video I've uploaded is a video where I made some Jamaican hard dough bread. Um, okay, that's what people like. People like it. One of the things I noticed is I got a number of comments from people saying, well, this is an authentic Jamaican hard dough bread because I had made it with cinnamon raisin type filling. And yeah, I know. The gentleman in question, the Jamaican gentleman who introduced me to hard dough bread, is a big raisin fanatic. So I decided to make bread that he would like and put raisins in it. So there we are. So anyway, I made the video a while ago and haven't really got back to it. And at some point I said, well, I wonder if I could reproduce the hard dough bread because I don't, with COVID and all, I didn't really like using 4 tablespoons of yeast. So I did some experiments to try and figure out, well, what makes Jamaican hard dough bread come out with the crumb that it does. And for those of you that aren't familiar with the bread, it has a very soft but dense crumb. So if you buy like store bread, Wonder Bread, whatever, the bread's gonna be very soft, but there's not a lot to it. It's very light. Whereas hard dough bread is soft, but as the name says, it has a hard dough. So it's a more soft but dense bread, which is kind of a strange combination. So I had done some experiments using lightly enriched doughs to try and figure out what worked. And finally, today, I came up with this result here. And unfortunately, you can see there's some markings here. Basically, I cut the bread before it had an opportunity to cool off properly. So that's what made all those markings. Once you let it cool off, it's going to cut normally, and it's going to be, like a hard dough bread. Interestingly, I was talking with a couple people about the hard dough, and they said, well, the thing about the Jamaican hard dough is it has this aftertaste to it. And it was interesting because I was eating the bread at the time. I was like, yeah, wow, there is that aftertaste. It has a very bready aftertaste to it. I mean, you eat it and you know that you've had a piece of bread. So overall, I would consider this a pretty successful experiment. So what is the key to hard dough bread? And the key is, and I thought this was kind of interesting, is you underproof the bread. You do not let it rise. So what I did was I made the dough, threw it in my proofing drawer, let it sit for a while, and normally they tell you wait until the bread approximately doubles in volume before you shape it and do your second rise. So what I did is I said, well, we do about a 50% rise. And okay, that worked out. So then I rolled it. You take the bread and you make a tablet, and then you roll it up, and then I put it in a loaf pan and allowed it to do a second rise. And again, rather than giving it enough time to do a full rise double in size, I let it rise about 50%. Now, you can tell it's underproofed because you can see right here that line there. What happens is when you throw the bread in the oven, you get the spring. And the spring is especially bad if you have underproofed your bread. So that's one of the ways you can tell your bread is fully proofed. You don't get the massive oven spring and you don't get the rips where it goes. Now, certainly there are ways to avoid those tears and still get a good hard dough, which is slightly underproofed. And if I was making it commercially, I would probably explore some of those. I would guess that Pullman loaf pans, which are cast iron loaf pans with a top on them that prevents the bread from growing up too much, would be a good way to do that. But I have no interest in buying them, and since the bread is for my personal consumption, I don't really care that it's slightly torn where it is underproofed. So what is the recipe for the bread? I talked about the rise. Basically what I did was I took 560 grams of flour. I just dumped out the rest of my bag of bread flour, King Arthur bread flour, and said, oh, I think there's about a pound in there. So I dumped it in, and there was about a pound and a quarter in there. But, that's okay. I bake a lot. I'm used to using ratios. So 560 grams of flour, which is 1 pound, 4 ounces approximately. So I put in 10% butter, so 56 grams of butter, about half a stick. I put in 10% sugar, so 50 to 55 grams of sugar. I was a little low on the sugar. I didn't measure it exactly. Poured it in, mixed it together, and I did use the technique which is called reverse creaming, or the biscuit method, which is basically where you take your butter and you mix it into the flour before you add the water. And what that does is it kind of coats the butter with flour, and if you're making biscuits, and I've used it to make cookies, you'll find that it gives a lot softer texture, which is kind of what I was shooting for. So 560 grams flour, 56 grams butter, 50 grams sugar, so 10% sugar, 10% butter. It's a moderately enriched bread, I would call it. I then added a cup of water, which is about 250 grams, and then maybe just a little bit more. So between 50 and 60% hydration, which is low hydration, but nothing horrible. And I think that's the other trick, is you probably wouldn't have lower hydration. Usually I like to go up to 65, 70% hydration for a bread loaf, but for this I went 50. So that's a little bit lower. I then let it rise, about half of a full rise, shaped it into a tablet, rolled it up, put it in a loaf pan, let it do another half rise, and then I baked it for 42 minutes in a 350 oven in a loaf pan. I have an electric oven, and it does not heat well. So if normally this would be, baked for 35 to 40 minutes, and I always go at the high end, and sometimes even a little above the high end. So if based on your oven, you might want to go as low as 35 minutes or up to 40. I go to 42 because the last time I baked a loaf of bread at 40, it was just 2 minutes short of being done. So I said, all right, we'll do 2 extra minutes. Took it out of the oven. It was done. I waited for it to cool, but not long enough, and ate it. And it was delicious. So that was my story of actually going back and trying to make Jamaican hard dough bread again, and I think I had a great success. So thank you.